At first glance, the Sahara Desert seems like the last place history would hide. Surely no civilization could survive here, in a landscape this barren and brutal. But in recent decades, our understanding of this region has completely shifted, and scientific discoveries have raised questions that are hard to ignore. So is it possible we may have overlooked an entire chapter of the human story? Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel, we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. We think of the Sahara as a vast, lifeless desert, a sea of sand stretching from horizon to horizon. But not too long ago, it was the exact opposite. The Sahara was green, lush, alive, and recent scientific research has revealed something astonishing. This region was once filled with rivers, lakes, grasslands, and forests. It teemed with wildlife, elephants, giraffes, antelopes, and yes, even humans. But here's the thing, this wasn't millions of years ago. No, in fact it was relatively recent, only 5,000 years ago, practically yesterday in the grand scheme of history. For nearly 9,000 years, the Sahara had one of the most stable and hospitable climates on Earth. It may have been one of the best places to live on the entire planet. This fertile window is known as the African humid period, a stretch of time from around 14,000 to 5,000 years ago, when North Africa bloomed with life. But here's why that date matters. It ends just before what we call the beginning of civilization. Mainstream history tells us that the first true civilizations, like ancient Sumer and ancient Egypt, appeared at this exact time, around 5,000 years ago. But here's where things get strange. Ancient Egypt was in the Sahara, yet it seems to spring up just as the green period ends, precisely when the paradise turns to desert. Why is this? Why would a civilization suddenly flourish after the land became inhospitable? And what exactly happened that caused this lush, vibrant region to collapse into the world's largest desert? Well, what many people don't realize is that this transformation didn't happen slowly. The Sahara didn't fade, it flipped. After 9,000 years of stability, the region underwent a sudden and catastrophic shift. Scientists call it rapid desertification. A shift in the planet's axial tilt reduced the amount of sunlight hitting North Africa. That weakened the monsoon system, and rainfall began to disappear. As the rain stopped, vegetation dried off, and with less greenery, the land began reflecting more sunlight, which further reduced rainfall, triggering a runaway feedback loop. But this collapse didn't take thousands of years. No, it happened in just a few centuries. A thriving green paradise that had existed for millennia suddenly turned into a hostile desert, fast, and for the people living there, that must have been devastating. But now here's where things get really interesting. The collapse of the Green Sahara lines up almost perfectly with the sudden rise of ancient Egypt. That's odd. Why would one of history's most iconic civilizations emerge right after the environment got worse? This goes against everything we know about how civilizations form. Usually, they rise because of abundance, not in the wake of environmental disaster. But here's a thought. What if the civilization we call ancient Egypt wasn't the beginning, but the continuation? As the Sahara dried up, what if the people who once lived in those fertile lands were forced to migrate, clinging to the last stretch of green, the Nile River? It would have been the final oasis, the last viable lifeline in a collapsing world. Could the founders of Egypt have been the remnants of a lost culture, one that thrived in the Sahara during its green golden age and who have since been lost to time? Now, according to the orthodox view, this is impossible. There cannot have been any civilization in this region that predated ancient Egypt. But intriguingly, that's not what the Egyptians themselves believed. The ancient Egyptians didn't see themselves as the beginning. They saw themselves as the inheritors of something much older, a legacy civilization. And we know this because of the records that they left behind. Three major ancient texts, the Abydos King List, the Turin King List, and the Palermo Stone, give us our earliest timelines of Egyptian rulers. In all three cases, the Egyptians recount a past that extends not just a few centuries beyond the conventional timeline, but over 30,000 years further back. However, modern historians don't believe them. Egyptologists today selectively decide which parts of these records to accept as fact and which to dismiss as myth, despite the fact the original Egyptian authors made no such distinction. Let's look at the Wikipedia page for the Turin King List. It confidently states that the papyrus was originally a tax roll, but on its back is written a list of the rulers of Egypt, including mythical kings, such as gods, demigods, and spirits, as well as human kings. But here's the key problem. The ancient Egyptians themselves never categorized their rulers this way. To them, this was simply a record of their past, one continuous line of kings and rulers, stretching deep into prehistory. This division between real and mythical is a modern invention, but to the ancient Egyptians, this was all one continuous record. They didn't view their past as legend, they viewed it as history. So here's the question. What if the civilization we call ancient Egypt wasn't the first spark of human advancement in the region, but a reboot of a much older culture, one now buried beneath thousands of years of sand in what we call the Sahara? Here's something that's rarely discussed. The ancient Egyptians often spoke of a mysterious place they called the Land of the West. It was associated with the afterlife, but also curiously described in some texts as a fertile, abundant land. In the Book of the Dead, this paradise is called the Field of Reeds, a place of lush crops, flowing waters, and endless peace. Mainstream scholars usually interpret this as symbolic, a mythic heaven. But what if it wasn't entirely metaphorical? What if these visions of green fields in the West were cultural memories, echoes of a time when the Sahara itself was a fertile, thriving landscape? And the Egyptians weren't alone. Centuries later, classical authors like Ptolemy, in his Geographica, described lakes, rivers, and settlements far to the south and west of Egypt, deep in what's now the Sahara Desert. Strangely, some of the features he recorded line up perfectly with ancient river systems and paleolakes we've only recently detected using satellite imagery. So how could he have known that? Unless this was ancient knowledge, preserved and passed down long after the land itself was swallowed by sand. This all raises a compelling possibility. The Sahara wasn't just green, it was inhabited, and not by scattered nomads, but by structured societies, with trade routes, ritual centers, maybe even cities, wiped clean by a brutal and sudden climate collapse. Well, it's a powerful theory, but myth and memory aren't enough. So the question becomes, is there any solid evidence? Well, interestingly, genetic evidence has emerged that supports the idea of complex, interconnected populations living in the Sahara, long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. Ancient DNA from sites like Teforalt in Morocco from 15,000 years ago reveals a surprising blend of sub-Saharan African and Near Eastern ancestry, suggesting long-distance contact across what was then a habitable Sahara. As well as this, studies of early North African genomes show genetic continuity into later Nile Valley populations, indicating that as the Sahara dried, its inhabitants likely migrated eastward to where the Egyptian civilization emerged. These genetic signals suggest that the area once supported dense, dynamic, and interlinked human populations. On top of this are some mysterious archaeological sites that don't seem to fit the orthodox view. One of the most intriguing is Nabta Playa, an ancient site deep in the Nubian desert, dated to as early as 7,500 BC. Here we find clear evidence of a megalithic culture that predates Egypt by thousands of years. A series of megalithic structures, including a stone circle precisely aligned with the summer solstice, suggest advanced astronomical and geometric knowledge. The site also contains burial mounds, ceremonial structures, and evidence of a complex cattle-rearing society. In the central Sahara, in regions like Tibesti, Fezzan, and Mesak Setafet, archaeologists have uncovered stone burial mounds. Some are intricately constructed and contain human remains buried with tools, ornaments, and pigments, i.e. ritual burials, which suggests social organization and probably hierarchies. In the ancient Niger Basin, archaeologists have uncovered remains of an aquatic culture, prehistoric peoples who thrived around vast lakes and rivers during the African humid period. Sites like Gobero reveal organized cemeteries, elaborate burials with ochre and jewelry, and advanced fishing tools and watercraft, dating back as far as 8,000 BC. These findings again point to structured, sophisticated societies long before the rise of Egypt. Then there's Tassili N'Aza in modern-day Algeria. This vast sandstone plateau holds over 15,000 rock engravings and paintings, many dated to as old as 10,000 BC, thousands of years before the first pharaohs. And these aren't simple doodles. They depict pastoral scenes, domesticated cattle, ceremonial dances, and complex human figures, adorned with headdresses, robes, and ornaments. Some images even appear to show domed huts or communal dwellings, suggesting elements of settled life, rather than purely nomadic foraging. And there's even been reports of a whole prehistoric town found in the Western Sahara, as old as 15,000 years ago. Whether true or not, this demonstrates just how little we know about the deep past in this region. But aside from all of that, one of the most intriguing pieces of this puzzle comes from a monument we all know, the Great Sphinx of Giza. The orthodox view dates the Sphinx to around 2500 BC, built during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. But here's the strange part. There are no inscriptions on the Sphinx that actually link it to Khafre, and some geologists, most notably Dr. Robert Schoch, argue that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure don't match the dry wind-blasted conditions of the last few thousand years. Instead, they resemble water erosion, the kind caused by sustained rainfall over long periods. This raises a staggering possibility. If that erosion was caused by rain, then the Sphinx must date back to the African humid period, the last time this region experienced heavy, consistent rainfall. In other words, the Sphinx may have been carved thousands of years earlier than we thought, not in the age of pyramids, but in the time when the Sahara was green. If that's true, then someone, some culture, was building megalithic monuments during prehistory, in the heart of a thriving green Sahara. But let's be clear, again, this isn't proof of a lost civilization beneath the Sahara. It's suggestive, intriguing, but not conclusive. However, one fact is beyond dispute. We've barely scratched the surface of this vast desert. Due to its vast size, over 9 million square kilometers, only a tiny fraction of the Sahara Desert has been archaeologically surveyed, let alone excavated. Some estimates suggest that less than 1% of the Sahara has been properly explored using modern archaeological methods. Why? Well, because it's hot, remote, politically unstable in places, and simply overwhelming in scale. But under all that sand could lie entire chapters of human history we've never read. If an advanced culture did once exist here, climate collapse could have buried its remains under dunes that stretch for hundreds of miles. Stone structures, cities, even inscriptions preserved but hidden. And until we look, we'll never know. So considering the vast area now covered by sand, and the fact we know this area was once green, lush and inhabited, isn't it at least possible that we're missing something? That perhaps an entire civilization, or even multiple civilizations, once thrived here, only to be erased by time and sand. Either way, the Sahara undoubtedly holds many secrets, and the evidence we have is already enough to raise some serious questions. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. I just launched a brand new Discord server, so check that out if you're interested and you want to continue these conversations. I also have a free email list for bonus content if you're interested in that. Please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, and thank you all so much for being here.